Welcome to today's episode of The Mystical Unknown. I'm your host, Angela Edwina, and today I'm talking with fellow psychic medium Roni Glad. We're going to be talking about all kinds of psychic medium things today and telling some stories and just having a lot of fun and letting all of you know what it's like to be a psychic medium. So I'd like to welcome Roni.
Hi.
I actually met her on TikTok. Um, like 2 years ago. It's been a long time, hasn't it?
It's been 2 years.
Yeah. So, Roni, you're a psychic medium, just like me. And when did you know that you had psychic abilities and mediumship abilities?
That's funny because like when do you start having experiences versus when you realize it's a gift or
Right.
something more? I've had experiences since I was 3, but I was told I had a discerned spirit when I was 15 by a family friend. So
I completely understand that. I've had experiences all my life, and I was told something different. I was told I was possessed. So yeah, so I understand, having the abilities, but not knowing what they are until later in life because, yeah. So when did you find out that it was like psychic and mediumship abilities?
so that actually happened like when you and I met.
Oh, really?
Not just because of you, but because of another medium. It was around the same time. I have a friend who's a medium, but it's way too overwhelming for her.
Hmm.
So she doesn't do readings typically, but she happened to do one for my mom and I, and it was like mind blowing. And she shared with me that like I could do this too. And I was like, no. She goes, okay, chicken shit.
I mean, listen, it
So
takes a lot of courage to come out with these abilities.
I had been doing tarot for probably a year and a half
Hmm.
at that point. But I have like a plethora of paranormal experiences. Like I have said for a while I could write a book.
Oh, yeah. Well, I also started in tarot before I actually came out. And I think me actually putting the words that I'm a psychic medium was one of the hardest things for me to do because it was scary because it comes with a lot of judgment. So, her being overwhelmed, I completely understand. It like doing what we do and doing readings for other people and all this other stuff, it's not for everybody. You have to have a thick skin for one. Um, Not to mention all of the crazy things that happen, like the craziness. Like I swear, it's like paranormal stuff is just normal around here.
I I had an experience that I swear nobody will believe. Like I swear no, and I was the only one to witness this. I We had just gotten Sophia, which is like one of our oldest puppies. Well, she's only like 3, but I had her. She was sleeping on my chest. My boyfriend was sleeping next to me. The cat was sleeping in the clothes basket. And like the like lyric was outside. My mom wasn't home, and I was just playing a game on my phone. And I'm sitting there, and I'm unorganized, so I had my drawer open like to my nightstand without even thinking. So like if I had just like bumped the nightstand or something, this little mouse toy for the cat would have just fallen into the
Hmm.
drawer. It shot across the room and like hit the trash can. And
Wow.
I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a second. Like I looked over at him, he was sleeping, he didn't see it. I'm like, nobody's ever gonna believe.
That he just shot across the room.
So, and then later in the day, we were potty training her. and she kept barking at the door. It was like the first time she ever opened her mouth to bark because she was usually pretty quiet. And I like stepped forward into what she was barking at, and I was like, okay. So I did like a walkthrough with with my usual routine and felt way better after. But I feel like that's something I've been trying to continue to open myself up to. It's like the realization that there are things that can be negative, but that it doesn't have to control your belief and how comfortable you are.
Right. You know, talking about the cat toy flying across the room. Here, it's like we hear noises a lot, especially in the kitchen. The cat is in the kitchen, and I'm like, listen, if I one day I told them, I said, listen, if you're gonna be in my kitchen, can you at least cook or clean up or do something instead of like making banging noises that I can't figure out where it's coming from. But
That's been
like,
happening recently to
and
us too.
it's like these weird. It almost sounds like a metallic banging noise, and the cats even hear it. They'll look. They
Dogs
don't get
bark.
scared.
The dogs bark. Like Lyric will bark at it, and there have been several times where we've heard, and Tom will look at me. He'll be like, "I heard that," and I'll come
Hmm.
down and look, and it's either the neighbor outside or we can't figure out who it is. Like we can't figure
Right.
out where the noise
Right.
came from. Like,
And as far as feeling anything negative, I haven't felt anything negative here. The only time I've really felt some negativity is when I'd had a reading with somebody that was really just a negative person in life. Um, but I also do cleanses and stuff on a regular basis. So I keep my area, my whole house, pretty cleansed.
yeah.
But you live kind of out in the woods, don't you?
Well, at the edge of a small town.
Yeah. So
So it's
you
like,
have a lot more going on. I'm in the city, so it's like,
now I
I
grew
don't
up
have.
in the woods and I
Oh,
lived in the middle of mountain woods for 2 years. Yeah.
yeah, mountains have a lot of interesting energy.
I think I told you a couple of stories before.
Right. You
Oh,
did.
there
You
were some
did.
the random screaming that we couldn't identify in the middle of the night, or the tree knocks. Okay, so that night it had snowed, and so like this is the middle of the mountains. Like no one's gonna be on the roads. There's like a foot of snow outside, so you step outside. We're hanging out, and you hear like they knocked back, and then again we heard like three
That's
knocks.
Bigfoot.
Yeah, that's what.
That's like Bigfoot because you hear about them like banging on trees and communicating over long distances by banging on trees. So it may have been like to Bigfoot. I don't know.
Was two separate occasions. The one the scream that really scared me, like that freaked me out. It sounded like a man was in pain, and it was a male voice specifically, and it was like blood curdling scream. Like I dropped my keys, reach for my keys, rush to the driver's side of the door, reach for the handle, and as I'm like pulling on the handle, I hear it again.
That's
No,
that's a big note for me. Nope.
absolute nope. I
Nope.
told my boyfriend, he's like, go get your mom.
Yeah,
By the time you come back, it'll be gone. It's
I will
nothing.
take a ghost any day over that. I will take ghost spirits,
Day.
whatever you want to call them, all day long over any of that mess.
Oh
Like,
my God.
yeah.
I had one of my first experiences doing mediumship, like through an investigation, was at the Waynesburg Historical Society in Greene County, PA. And I went in knowing nothing about the property or anything about the history. And there's like a lot of people, like so many people. And they immediately took me like down to the basement first. And as we're walking down the steps, I yelled up to Drake. I was like, snakes. I don't know. And he just started laughing. We round the corner and there's like all these rubber snakes.
Yikes. Why
That
was
was,
there rubber snakes? Wait a minute. What is the significance of that? That's kind of creepy to begin with.
I don't know. It's like an old um I don't know what you would call it. It wasn't a space for disabled, but there were many people who like traded their time there, I believe, for work. I could be mistaken. But like there were a lot of people in and off the property, and I think like the people that work there just play pranks on each other. So there's like rubber snakes
Gotcha.
and stuff. But like the basement, I actually was touched in the basement and I was like, I don't want to be down here. I'm not doing this down here. I don't want to be around it.
Is that the only time you've ever been touched by spirit?
No,
Okay.
no.
Yeah,
Um,
I know I've been like I've felt them like grab my arm before, and
I have very,
I was laying in bed one night and grabbed my foot, which that scared the crap out of me. It doesn't, even though I know what it is, that is still scary,
it's
especially
still
when
like
you're like trying to go to sleep and you're like, what is grabbing my foot?
a lot of my paranormal experiences are not so much like touching physical, but very physical.
Mhm.
And like like the first time I ever had my father, I didn't realize it was him until my mom came home that night. So I can't remember if we've talked about this before, but I was doing homework in the back room. My mom and my sister had gone out to spend time together and enjoy a drink together. I was babysitting my nephew. I think I was like almost 16 at the time. And he was asleep upstairs, like sound asleep out. And he was a hard sleeper, so nothing woke him.
Mhm.
Our dog Jasper at the time was laying to my left. And my mom told me to be off the computer by 11. Okay, no problem. 11 o'clock, the computer turns off. So I unplugged the computer. I wait a couple minutes because that's what you do. And then you plug the computer back in. Well, it still wouldn't like boot up. I was like, okay, well, I'll unplug it and like hopefully I didn't mess anything up. Like I'll just wait till mom gets home. We'll see what's up. So I'm sitting there on my phone and I'm like, oh, my phone's gonna die. So I plug my phone in, my phone's working. So it's not the outlet. But I tried again and the computer would not turn on. So I'm sitting there on my phone and I hear the door open. And I'm like, there's no like talking, no commotion. I'm like, Mom, nothing. Mom, nothing. So I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I hear things hit the floor, like real soft, like kind of like footsteps, but it was like footsteps plus things.
Mhm.
I was like, Mom, and nobody said anything. And Jazz sat up and he's wagging and looking and wagging. And I'm like, okay, so like it's Jenny, our mom. Well, this person goes up the stairs and turns the shower on. I'm like, okay, it's probably just like mom. Well, I get up and go into the living room, and all the clothes I had folded on the couch were in a line from this kitchen door to the ottoman in the living room. And the door was open, and the shower was on, and nobody was in the shower.
Wow, that's wow.
What I find most extraordinary is when mom came home, I told her what happened. I left everything as is except for the door. I shut and locked the door, left everything as is. And when she got home, I told her, and she started to cry because it was a Friday night. And on Friday nights, my dad would leave the Lardon to come home from, because he was a full-time fine dining chef. So he would leave the Lardon from a hard night cooking, come home, and from the door, work clothes, immediate shower.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing.
So it was him. You can't, and it's so, and that's
Mhm.
another one that's like that sounds like so far-fetched, but I will
Right.
never in my life forget that. And that was one of the first times I experienced him, and I was like, you're still here.
Mhm.
Like we just honored 20 years of his passing just the other day, and he's still here. And
Well, it's,
like,
I like to tell people their loved ones, when they first pass away, they're around quite a bit. Like they want to make sure the people they left behind are okay. They kind of taper off the more time goes by, but they still pop in. Like
Oh yeah.
until they decide it's time for them to reincarnate or do whatever they have to do over on the other side, they still pop in.
I think that's something too that is ever changing when you experience spirituality, because it's more than just like doing witchcraft and learning about witchcraft and educating yourself on different religions. I feel like
Hmm.
it's like allowing yourself to experience what is naturally amongst us,
Right.
um, and not being afraid of it. And I think that's a lot of things with many of my clients is I'm so glad for our experience. I was so scared to come to you.
Hmm.
That and what's frustrating is there are mediums who are harmful, not
Yes.
just people who are are sweet talkers who will scam you for money and then immediately run, but like the people who are spiritually manipulative and harmful to
Yes.
people. And
Yes.
I think that's super important to talk about. Like, how are
Yes.
we caring for the people that are coming
And
into our lives?
so for me, being a medium means that I'm just a go-between. I should not be putting my beliefs into anything. I should not be putting my emotions into anything. I'm literally a go-between the spirit and the sitter. But
Yesterday, go ahead. Sorry.
there's some mediums that they have fear-based beliefs and they bring that into their practice instead of just being, neutral. They bring that fear in, and then that fear comes out with the messages, it comes out with, all this stuff, and then they scare the sitter, and it's harmful.
Also, I had a client once reach out to me because a woman, and it was to my finding that this woman had done a spiritual working on my client on purpose to get her to spend more money to have the curse removed, thinking that it was something that was there generationally. And that to me, like no matter what you believe as far as energetic exchange is concerned, if you're wishing harm on somebody for the simple fact that you want them to cave and give you money, there's a difference between working and accepting a wage and taking advantage of people.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And also there's the ones that will say like there's a dark attachment or something like that, but I can remove it for $500. You know, it's like seriously.
I will
Like no. No.
Anytime I've had a client that was scared, I have not once charged them to help them with what they were afraid of. And I'm
Same.
not saying that in saying that I think people who do charge for those services are bad people. That is not my belief at all. But in that moment, if somebody comes to me in vulnerability, I'm I'm going to be supportive to them, especially if they're supporting my small business.
I found that just explaining to people what I know about the afterlife and what I know about where their loved ones are and how the energy works and, explaining all of that to them helps to ease a lot of the fears they have.
Oh, yeah. And back to what you said earlier about keeping separation, like simply being a vessel for communication. And I just yesterday doing a reading with a young woman, her father came forward and she was like, I can't believe you know all this. And I was like, it's not me. Like
Right.
I am simply just relaying what his mannerisms, his personality, how he
Mhm.
would say things, because I don't get words. I do to an extent. But it's way more in how they're invoking emotion within me and how I would express that verbally rather than getting like a sentence in my brain.
Right.
That make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah. So with me, the first thing that starts coming through is I usually start feeling their ailments. Like it could be how they died, or it could be like something that they had in life.
Yep.
And that was the biggest obstacle for me was figuring out, okay, is that me feeling that or is that them making me feel that? Um, and I think that's where, practice comes in with new mediums. Like I'm a big advocate of practice. You have to practice to understand what is your feelings, what is, your physical feelings, and what is coming through from spirit. And that's another reason why you have to stay neutral. If I'm ever sick, I don't do readings. If I am ever like, I've been going through about a grief because my parents passed away. If I'm having a bad day with my grief, I don't do readings
And I
because I
am,
cannot discern what is mine and what is the spirit's.
and can I just say thank God for those clients of ours who are understanding of what we're experiencing
Yes.
as human beings. Like the fact that I have clients that understand I'm a human and have
Mhm.
conditions and am experiencing life, the compassion, and that's what's so important. The other day, somebody said to me, "You look so happy," and I said, while my physical being may not be feeling well, I emotionally see the love that I get from every
Right.
single client, from every friend, every family member, and where I find love, I find peace. And no matter how my physical being is feeling, if there is peace, then I can be content. I can be
Right.
content.
Right.
And
Right.
I that's what separates too. Like it's a reminder that we are spiritually experiencing the human body.
Right. And I have clients that have been with me for years that have watched my spiritual growth and
Same.
watched me accept what I really am because I tried to deny it for a very long time. Um, so it's like, all those people that have stuck with me, I'm so grateful for them. So grateful. I have a lot of people like that actually.
Same. I feel if I ever feel like I am not doing enough or I am not good enough, I remind myself that I am blessed to have the supporters I do because there are people who
Mhm.
do not have that.
Right.
And I remember what it was like to not have that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So growing up, were were the people around you like your mom, was she accepting of the things you felt and
My mom was super cool. My nana always attributed it to my imagination. My nana was a real traditional Catholic Italian. So she like believed in spirits and ghosts and whatnot. So she never discouraged how I was feeling. Um, but she was always very realistic in grounding me. And I learned veiling from her actually, because she never specifically told me, hey, I wear this to protect myself from negativity. Um, but it would take she was taking care of herself. I'm taking care of
right,
myself. That's
right,
why do you Nana, why do you tie your scarf? I'm taking care of myself.
right,
I'm taking care of my emotions. And she loved pretty scarves. So I veil to honor her too. But so she was really accepting. I've always had just really blunt experiences, and family members who are, for the most part, super open. The people that I am closest to, um, because I mean, I was not the only one experiencing paranormal. Like there were other kids in my family who were also experiencing paranormal activity, experiencing loss of family members, trying to cope with change. Um, and I think one of the things that I regret growing into an adult that is now a psychic medium is not sharing what my career was with my grandmother until very close to her passing. So probably 6 months before her passing, my mom came to me and said that one of my great great relatives did dream analysis and kept a dream journal. And that's
mhm,
something I've always been distinctly able to do without cards, without, I've always, no matter what dream it is, I can tell you what it is. Like I can tell you what it means. I can tell you how it relates to you, how it'll be beneficial, what you need to listen to. And I didn't know that that was a part of our lineage. And then because my grandmother, my Nana, was Irish Catholic, so I was always so nervous to share with her that I was a medium because I was so worried for disappointing her. And then I went to her and told her what I do, and she was like, "That is so cool."
oh, that is such a great reaction.
It was like that. My Nana was so accepting and loving. My grandfather actually came to me when she passed. I had a dream that he whispered in my ear, "She's with me. She's okay." And then I woke up in a cold sweat and checked my phone. My mom had texted me to let me know.
That's interesting. You had an experience when your grandmother died. I did too. And it was before I was out, before I really I was still living in Alabama, so I was still very much in the box.
Okay.
And my grandmother actually came to me, and I was at work, and I was like, why is 90 standing right there? And then I was like, oh shit. And I stood there for a minute, and then like a couple minutes later, they I was working at a department store, and they called me overhead. I had an emergency phone call. She passed away. And I was like, as soon as I got on the call, I already knew what it was about. Because she was literally standing right in front of me. And she just kind of backed away. She smiled at me and just kind of backed away. And I was like, what just happened?
Well, my pap Jerome passed away like shortly after I was born. I'm pretty sure within a month of my birth he passed. And I remember talking to him. My dad had a fine dining restaurant, and that restaurant was something he and Pap built, rebuilt, renovated, worked on together. It was for my dad, but their project for them, to my understanding. And I remember sitting at the piano in the Lardin talking to my pap. I remember his face. I remember not the conversations, but I remember what his voice sounded like. I remember how tall he was. I remember the way his hair was cut. And then when I turned 7, I asked Nana, so Nana, how did Pap pass? And then I was like, can you remind me again, like when he passed? And she was like, oh, he passed like the March after your birthday. Like, I'm pretty sure, like just like a month, March, or like just after March. Um, and I was like, no, because I have conversations with him. I have memories with him. And she was like, he was not alive when you were 3.
Right.
Those were like some of the first experiences were talking to him. And I had imaginary friends.
Yes, I did too. They were not that imaginary.
No, they weren't. And we learned from, so my playroom was in the attic of the Larden. Cricket and Berdita were an adult couple who would play with me. We just sit and talk. Like I would play with my toys, they would interact with my imagination. I remember conversations with Cricket and Berdita. They were real people to me.
Hmm.
And I came downstairs crying because they were leaving. They had suitcases. They told me they were going and it was time for them to go. And I think that was the only time I've ever experienced somebody in an attempt of reincarnation, because they both were like ready. They were like, we have to go. We can't be here with you anymore. Our time is done.
Trying to think if I've experienced that. I don't think I've experienced them actually telling me that it's time for them to go. Now, I have experienced, it's like, I guess it was kind of time. I've had them come through and say that they wouldn't be around anymore. So, I mean, I guess that could be why. Um, but I've never experienced them actually like leaving to.
They left. They went through. So in the attic there was a window that there's a story of it slamming on its own too. It's bolted shut, so there's no way it would even open. But that's, I digress. I'm facing the window, and they backed, and that's another thing. Spirits always back away from
Back
me.
up. They back up. Yes.
They never turn their back, and it's not in communication with them with clients, which now that I think about it, that I've never had a spirit turn their back during a reading. But they backed, and it like and they dissipated, and I went downstairs and I was crying. Penny Lardon was there, who was the previous owner's daughter, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And she picked me up and was like, why are you crying? And I told her, I said, Cricket and Berdita are leaving forever. He was wearing like a blue suit and a red tie, and she had this polka dotted dress, and they had their suitcases. They're gone forever. She immediately put me down. Her aunt and uncle, Cricket and Berdita, who died in the house, were buried in a blue suit with a red tie and a polka dotted dress. And also, now that I think about it, when we moved to the farm, I had an experience where I saw a spirit in the reflection of the television. And as I walked towards it, it backed up into the other room. And then I looked, and as I looked back, it was gone. It wasn't in the reflection anymore. And I didn't see it physically. But I was playing my guitar. My mom used to spy on me. So I was like Mom. And it was like it shook its head no at me.
During a reading, I always tell them to line up.
Oh,
And when they line up, when it's time for the next one to come up, they'll back away. They don't turn around and walk away because I'm doing this because they always come up on this side for me, but they'll like back away and the other one will come up and they just go like this and they back away. And then
I,
like when I saw my grandmother, she backed away. Like I don't think I have ever seen one. You know how you see the paranormal videos where it looks like they turn around and run or something? I've literally never seen a spirit do that.
it's always the
And
front.
yeah, I wonder why.
I was
I
just
thought I was the only one that experienced it. I had no idea other people experienced that.
Well, what else is interesting is when I was 15, when I was first really understanding that I could experience the paranormal, I had a lot happen with paranormal experiences. And there was
Mhm.
one where I had this black mass of energy, like mind you, this is like 11 years ago, which is crazy. And it's like in the corner of the ceiling, and it's like a cloud, and it's dark, like it's dark in the room, and I'll even show you the corner. It was right here. It was right in this corner.
Just a dark mass.
It was, and I was sitting in the recliner. There used to be another television that was sitting here,
Mhm.
and it was in this corner. And then I could, you know when you're doing readings for people and you physically, it's like so weird. It's not that you see them, but you feel almost like
Yeah.
how tall they are, what they. So in
Mhm.
my brain, I start to know that there's like a being there, and I can tell that there is a head and shoulders, but it's just coming out of like the black mass. At the same time, I was having a dream of this figure all in black that would like try to speak to me through the mirror in my bedroom.
Mhm.
This was creepy shit.
By the way, I do not do mirrors in the bedroom.
I had a
I
big floor length
don't
mirror.
like them.
It would point to me in the dream, it would point to me. And I remember I in the dream, like loved ones that I cared about would walk in and then engulf in flames. And then I had this dream for like 6 months. At the same time, we've talked a little bit about the sleep paralysis,
Mhm.
and abduction. Like that's a whole nother thing. But
That's a whole nother
whole
podcast
nother
episode.
podcast.
That will be happening, by the way.
So like it was the first time I astral projected. I literally sat with a spirit and then found out later friends of mine had been investigating a young girl who she was drenched. And we're sitting on my roof and I look and I see my dad and then I look this way and I look back and there's this girl and she's drenched in water and she's like, I just want my baby. And it was so weird. And I remember standing up and like going into my room and seeing myself laying in bed. And I remember laying back down the exact way I was like laying. And then I messaged Drew and I was like, hey, I just had this experience. And he was like, we're literally investigating information about a young lady that's like was drowned by her father because she got pregnant. And it like that was like, okay.
I feel like we're gonna have to have a whole podcast episode with stories because
There's so many.
I have so many stories. You have so many stories. Like, being a psychic medium is very stressful at times. It can be very stressful, by the way. Um, but it's very interesting. Like I have seen things and experienced things that I swear nobody would believe me. Nobody would believe me.
Yeah.
And talking about, you having that experience and then they were investigating that murder. I've had dreams and I've actually communicated with law enforcement. And, there's so much that we experience that is so hard to explain. It's so hard to make people believe us.
And how do you ethically study somebody who experiences these things scientifically? How do you do that ethically? You know?
I don't know.
Because you have to think about the condition of that person, how they feel consistently all the time, if they're happy, if they're uncomfortable. And if they're uncomfortable, are you putting them through a state of abuse? So how do
And
you even
also, the person doing the study needs to be a neutral party.
Yes, exactly.
Like,
How do you even have a neutral party? People usually either
right,
are at the extreme that we are kooks,
right,
or they
right,
or they heavily believe that we
right.
are, which, believing that it's a divine gift, while I appreciate what I can do, and I'm not trying, and I feel like there are psychic mediums who might not like what I'm about to say, but I think we all can do this. I don't think that I'm
I do
special.
too.
I don't think that I'm
We know
some.
that's what I tell people. Like, I have a whole program because I tell people everyone is psychic. Everyone may not be able to connect to the spirit world in the way that we can, but literally everyone is psychic. It
And
just
can
comes to a point of
experience it.
releasing all of the fear around it and really connecting with yourself. But everyone has abilities. Every single person has abilities.
I Hold on. And this isn't a book about mediumship at all. I just think it's funny how sometimes I'll pick up a book and start to look at it and read something that's like super perfect for the moment. And there was something I looked at the other day. Where can I read something to you?
Yes, yes.
And I want everyone who listens to keep in mind that this was
And we'll do this as a closing, and then
okay.
we'll wrap it
This
up.
this book was published in 69. Lack of communication between the older generation and the younger generation, and between one human being to another in the same world, same country, state, school, room, is one of the greatest dangers facing modern man. But meaningful communication requires effort, and many people today are either unwilling or unable to make this effort. Today's younger generation are more aware of the world around them and of their fellow man than any previous generation. And more important, they are in need of instruction sensitive to their needs, and teachers who realize this, that the value of this new generation is important, will create a meaningful world.
Yes.
And I think that that in general is important because it is not just teachers in school who educate. We all influence each other in how we progress as people, as we evolve. I'm pieces of everyone I've met. And it reminds us to think about too, like the idea, do we come from the same collective?
Mm-hmm.
Just food for thought.
Oh yeah, that was good food for thought, and very.
It's
That was
crazy.
it. That was written in '69. That was 10 years before I was born. Like, are they talking about boomers?
It's so crazy. They're talking about boomers being the influential generation. I should not. Nope.
That shouldn't be as funny as it is, but
No, my mom's boomer.
not all boomers, but
This is
most of
actually
them.
this is an educational book on poetry for like college students. It's not even like a spiritual book. But I just like,
Wow.
I read that and I was like, 69?
Right. And look at where we are today.
I think the same thing about the younger generation, the same
Mhm.
way many people think about my generation and older generations think about yours. And how do we learn to just exist and be? Everything is
That's
always going to keep moving. We don't have to move with it. We can exist. We don't have to have some major goal or make anyone proud. I don't know why I needed to say that, but
because somebody that's going to watch this needed to hear it.
Yeah.
That's why. You know how it is, and you know how we work. Sometimes we say things and we don't know why we say them, but there will be somebody in the comments that needed to hear that.
Because like, I want to release music, but I just turned 26, and that's like the age that you turned into an old lady apparently in the music industry. And then I learned that Lizzo is 34. Like, I'm not
26
giving
is not old.
26
26 is not
old. It's not.
It's not.
It's ridiculous that it's even a notion.
I am 43 and I don't feel old. So 26 is not old.
You have like stunning skin for 43.
Thank you.
Need,
on that note, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast today. And we have so much more to talk about. You will be back. And I'm going to put links to her Instagram, TikTok, website. Everything will be in the description. So if you would like to book a reading with Roni, you can go to the description and get to her website. And thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was
an amazing chat. An amazing chat. I feel like we could go on for hours, but we have to cut it down.
Put us in a room for a day together. We can record everything at once.
Right. Thank you. And if you would like to book a Roni, everything is in the description.
Thank you for joining me for tonight's episode of The Mystical Unknown.